I caught my sister with my fiancé, and before the sun came up, I was standing beside Chicago's most feared mafia boss saying I do. That sounds like revenge. It wasn't. It was the first decision I had made for myself in years. 6 hours earlier, I was carrying handmade wedding favors into the apartment I shared with Daniel. Rain streaked the windows. My heels were soaked. I could hear my sister laughing behind the half-closed living room door. Then I saw his shirt on the floor, her hand in his hair, and the future I had spent 6 years building collapsed without making a sound. But this story is not only about betrayal. It is about the moment a woman stops begging to be chosen and learns what power truly costs. Stay until the end. Like the video and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The future I had spent 6 years building did not collapse with a scream. It collapsed in the soft scrape of my sister's bare foot against the hardwood floor. For one strange second, none of us moved. Daniel stood beside the sofa with his white dress shirt open at the throat. Sophie was pressed against him, one hand still caught in his hair. Her lipstick was smeared across the corner of his mouth. On the coffee table beneath an empty wine glass lay the seating chart I had spent 3 nights fixing. Daniel's knee had crushed the section with my mother's family. Behind me, one of the glass jars rolled in a slow circle before stopping against the wall. The label faced up. Natalie and Daniel, a sweet beginning. Honey spread between the broken pieces, thick and golden beneath the apartment lights. Sophie looked down at it as if the mess were the most terrible thing in the room. Natalie. She said my name the way people speak to frightened animals. Softly, carefully, as if one wrong sound might make me dangerous. Daniel stepped away from her. Nat, wait. I looked at him. 6 years earlier, I had met Daniel Mercer in the lobby of a hotel during a conference. I had been carrying 2 coffees and an armful of presentation folders. He had held the elevator for me and joked that anyone with that much caffeine was either saving a company or destroying one. I had thought he saw me. Standing there now, I understood that he had only seen what I could carry. You were supposed to be meeting a client, I said. His mouth opened. No answer came. Sophie pulled the front of her blouse together. I can explain. Can you? Her eyes filled with tears so quickly that part of me wondered whether she had practiced. It was not planned. I glanced at the wine bottle on the table. 2 glasses. The candles I had bought last winter. Daniel's watch beside Sophie's phone. No, I said. It looks very spontaneous. Daniel took 1 step toward me. This was a mistake. A mistake is sending the wrong attachment to a client. Natalie. A mistake is forgetting a birthday, missing an exit, ordering the wrong size. His face tightened. Do not do this, I almost laughed. Do what turn it into one of your presentations. Not everything is a problem you can solve by making everyone feel stupid. The words landed with a dull force. Not because they were true, because he had been saving them. Sophie wiped at her cheeks. He has been unhappy for a long time. I looked at her, my little sister, the girl whose rent I had covered twice, the girl whose resume I had rewritten, the girl who had called me at 2 a.m. because her boyfriend would not answer, then accused me of being cold when I told her to stop calling him. You knew he was unhappy. She looked at Daniel before answering. That glance told me more than the words did. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. You have been consumed by the wedding you asked me to plan. I asked you to marry me. And then you disappeared from every decision that came after. That is not fair. The apartment seemed very quiet. Outside, rain traced silver lines down the windows. A train groaned somewhere beyond the buildings. On the kitchen counter, my laptop was still open to a spreadsheet of vendor payments Daniel had promised to review. Sophie whispered, he felt invisible. I stared at her. Then I looked at Daniel. You told her that. He rubbed his jaw. I did not know who else to talk to. You had me. You were always busy, fixing our life. You were controlling it. There it was, the story they had built together. In their version, Daniel was lonely. Sophie was compassionate. I was too efficient, too demanding, too distracted by details to notice the great tragedy unfolding inside my own home. The affair had not merely happened. They had given it a moral structure. Sophie stepped toward me, careful to avoid the broken glass. I never wanted to hurt you. You came into my apartment. I know. You drank my wine. Her face crumpled. You sat on my couch under photographs from my engagement and put your hands on the man I was supposed to marry. I am sorry. No, you are caught. Daniel said my name again. I turned to him. He looked frightened now. Not ashamed, not yet. Frightened. He had expected anger, perhaps. A scene. Something dramatic enough that he could point to it later and call me unstable. Instead, I walked to the coffee table. My engagement ring felt tighter than it had that morning. I twisted it once, then again. My fingers shook only after it came free. Daniel watched the ring in my palm. Do not. I placed it on top of the wedding binder. He stared at it. Natalie, please. You do not get to keep the woman who planned your life after sleeping with the woman who spent years making mine harder. Sophie flinched as though I had slapped her. Then she said, I love him. The sentence was quiet, almost reverent. Daniel looked at her. That look told me this was not the first time she had said it. Something inside me went still. How long neither answered. I looked from one to the other. How long Daniel lowered his eyes. Sophie whispered, a few months. The room tilted, but I did not. A few months meant secret messages while I sat beside them at family dinners. It meant hotel rooms during Daniel's business trips. It meant Sophie trying on bridesmaid dresses while carrying a secret beneath the silk. It meant they had watched me plan a wedding they already knew was a lie. I nodded once. Then I turned toward the bedroom. Daniel followed me. Where are you going to pack? You cannot leave like this. I stopped in the hallway. How should I leave? We need to talk. We are talking. No, you are performing. I faced him. I am standing in the apartment where I found my fiancé with my sister. You should be grateful I am only packing. He lowered his voice. You cannot throw away 6 years in 10 minutes. I did not throw them away. My voice sounded calm even to me. I walked in and watched you do it. I entered the bedroom and pulled a suitcase from the closet. The room looked exactly as I had left it that morning. The bed was made. Daniel's suit jacket hung over the chair. A framed photograph from our engagement party stood on the dresser. In the picture, he was kissing my temple. Sophie had taken it. I turned the frame face down. Daniel stood in the doorway while I packed underwear, 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, my laptop charger, and the navy dress I wore when I needed people to take me seriously. Where are you going? I do not know. That is not like you. No. I folded a blouse and placed it inside the suitcase. Maybe you did not know me as well as you thought. Sophie appeared behind him wearing one of my cream cardigans. The sight of it stopped me. That is mine. She looked down. I was cold. Take it off. Natalie, take it off. She removed it slowly and held it out. I crossed the room, took it from her, and placed it in the suitcase. Daniel watched me zip the bag. You are really ending this? I looked at him. You ended it months ago. I am simply the last person to find out. I rolled the suitcase into the hallway. At the front door, I stepped around the broken jars. Honey clung to the heel of my shoe. Sophie began crying harder. Please do not tell Mom yet. I looked over my shoulder. Even then, her first instinct was to manage the consequences. You should call her. She will be devastated. She will ask whether you are all right. Sophie stared at me. We both knew I was right. I opened the door. Daniel followed me into the corridor. Nat, come on, we can fix this. I pressed the elevator button. You always say that when you mean I can fix it. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. He reached for my arm. I stepped back before he could touch me. For the first time that night, anger broke through his fear. So that is it. You are going to run off and make some huge decision because you are hurt. The doors opened behind me. I pulled the suitcase inside. I spent 6 years making small decisions so you would never have to feel uncomfortable. I looked at him across the narrowing gap. I think I have earned one large one. The doors closed. My reflection appeared in the metal. My hair was damp from the rain. A thin scratch marked my wrist where the glass jar had broken. Honey stained the side of my black heel. I did not look heartbroken. I looked tired. My phone began vibrating before the elevator reached the lobby. Daniel, then Sophie, then Daniel again. By the time I stepped onto the street, my mother was calling. I almost ignored it. Then habit 1. Mom. What happened? Rain struck the awning above me. Across the street, headlights moved through the wet darkness. "You should ask Sophie. She is hysterical." "Of course she was." My mother lowered her voice. "She says you walked in on something. Something. I am not defending her." That was how my mother always began defending Sophie. "She made a terrible mistake, but she is scared you will never forgive her." I watched a taxi pass. The driver did not slow. "Tonight I am not responsible for how Sophie feels." Silence. Then my mother sighed. "Natalie, please do not do anything dramatic. We should sit down as a family and discuss this." A laugh rose in my throat, but it hurt too much to escape. I had been betrayed in my own home, and somehow I was the person being warned not to create a problem. "Did you ask whether I was all right?" My mother said nothing. That answer was enough. I ended the call, then I turned off my phone. For several minutes I stood beneath the awning with my suitcase beside me, watching rain wash the city into streaks of white and red. I could have called my best friend Claire. She would have come. She would have brought wine and fury and a list of reasons Daniel had never deserved me. But I could not bear to hear someone say they had always suspected. I could have booked a hotel. I could have gone to my mother's house and listened while she explained that Sophie had always felt overshadowed. Instead, I started walking. Chicago at night did not care that my wedding was over. The city kept moving. Buses sighed against curbs. Trains rattled above intersections. Office towers glowed through the rain while people hurried home with their collars raised against the wind. I walked south with no destination. At Wacker Drive, the wind came off the river hard enough to steal my breath. I stopped beneath a bridge and looked at the dark water below. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel and I had stood near that same river while a photographer took engagement pictures. He had complained about the cold. I had taken off my scarf and wrapped it around his neck. I could still hear the photographer telling us to look at each other as if no one else existed. Daniel had smiled perfectly. I wondered whether Sophie had already existed between us then. A black car slowed near the curb. For one irrational second, I thought Daniel had come after me. It continued past. I kept walking. By the time I reached an older section of the riverfront, the rain had become sleet. My fingers were numb around the suitcase handle. The buildings here were lower built of dark brick and old stone. Most of the storefronts were closed. A red sign flickered above an empty restaurant. Then I noticed a black door beneath a brass figure mounted on the wall. The figure looked like a saint, though someone had scratched the face away. There was no name above the entrance. A man in a dark coat stood beneath the narrow awning. I stopped in front of him. "Is this a bar?" His eyes moved over me. Wet hair, expensive coat, damaged heel, suitcase, wedding ribbon still tied around one handle. Not usually for people who have to ask. I looked at the door. Tonight has not been usual. For a moment I thought he would refuse. Then he opened it. Warm air touched my face. I stepped inside. The room was long and narrow with dark wood walls and low amber lights. Jazz played softly through hidden speakers. Men in tailored suits sat in booths with glasses untouched before them. No one laughed. No one raised his voice. The place did not feel like a bar. It felt like a church built for sins no one intended to confess. I left my suitcase near the coat check and sat at the far end of the counter. The bartender approached. He was older with silver hair and a scar near his left ear. "What can I get you?" I looked at the bottles. "Something that does not taste like a wedding." His gaze dropped to the pale mark on my ring finger. He poured bourbon into a heavy glass and set it before me. I drank too quickly. It burned all the way down. Another yes. Before he could pour it, a man's voice came from the stool beside mine. "She needs water first." I turned. He had not been there a moment earlier. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a charcoal suit that looked too expensive for the room, though everything about the room suggested money. His dark hair was brushed back from a face that might have been handsome if it were less controlled. A faint cut marked one knuckle. His eyes were almost black. I looked at the bartender. "Do customers usually order for strangers here?" The bartender said nothing. The man beside me rested one hand near his untouched whiskey. "No. Then tonight is full of exceptions." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The memory of one. The bartender placed a glass of water between us. I ignored it. The man said, "Bad night bad, 6 years. That is a large amount of regret for one glass. You do not look like a man who gives free advice. I do not." "Good. I'm tired of men explaining my life to me. He studied me for a moment. Most men looked at my face, then my body, then my ring. He looked at the small cut on my wrist, the suitcase by the door, and the honey drying on my shoe. You left in a hurry. I left at the correct speed. Was someone chasing you? No. I lifted the bourbon. Someone was asking me to stay. That can be worse. I looked at him more carefully. The room bent around his presence. Men entering from the back glanced toward him before choosing a table. The bartender never turned his back on him. Do I know you? No. That answer sounded rehearsed. It is efficient. I almost told him I hated efficient men. Instead, I drank. He nodded toward my hand. Recent. The engagement. The damage. I looked at the pale line around my finger. My sister was sleeping with my fiancé. He did not offer sympathy. That made it easier to continue. I found them in the apartment we shared. Next to wedding favors, I made myself because Daniel said ordering them would cost too much. The man looked at the honey on my shoe. That explains the evidence. I laughed once. It surprised me. He turned his glass slowly against the counter. What did you do? I gave him back the ring. And your sister, I told her to clean up the glass. This time he did smile. It was brief and cold and unexpectedly beautiful. She will remember that. I doubt it. Sophie remembers pain when it belongs to her. His gaze sharpened. You have spent a long time making excuses for people. I stared at him. You learned that from 3 sentences, no. He looked at my suitcase. I learned it from the fact that you packed 1 bag after 6 years. The observation struck too close. I picked up the water and drank mostly so I would not answer. He looked away first. That small mercy unsettled me more than his attention. What about you? I asked. Why are you sitting alone in a room where everyone seems afraid to look at you? They are not afraid to look at me. A man at a nearby table immediately lowered his eyes. I raised one eyebrow. The stranger glanced toward him. The man stood and moved to another booth. Fine, he said. Some of them are. What did you do? Many things. That sounds like an admission. It sounds like honesty. I should have been alarmed. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Perhaps because danger was easier to recognize when it stopped pretending to love you. The front door opened. Cold air moved through the room. 3 men entered. The stranger's hand stopped beside his glass. The bartender reached beneath the counter. Every conversation ended at once. The first man wore a gray overcoat darkened by sleet. His gaze moved across the room until it found the man beside me. Then it found me. He smiled. Well, he said, Raphael was right. The stranger rose from his stool. The room seemed to rise with him. The man in the gray coat looked at my bare ring finger, my suitcase, and the bourbon in front of me. DeSantis finally found himself a weakness. I turned toward the stranger. His face had changed. The faint amusement was gone. What remained was stillness, the kind that comes before violence. He looked at me. Get behind the bar. I did not move. The man in the gray coat reached inside his coat. The stranger caught my wrist and pulled me down as the first gunshot shattered the bourbon bottle beside my hand. Glass burst across the counter. Luca pulled me to the floor before I understood I had heard a gun at all. The room went dark. Someone had killed the lights. For half a second, there was only the ringing in my ears and the pressure of Luca's hand against the back of my neck. Then the bar exploded into motion. Chairs scraped. Men shouted. Another shot cracked through the darkness, followed by the heavy sound of a body striking the floor. Stay down, Luca said. His voice was close to my ear, calm, almost quiet. That frightened me more than the gunfire. A flash lit the room near the entrance. Luca turned toward it and fired once. A man cried out. I crawled behind the bar, dragging one knee through broken glass. The bartender was crouched beside a cabinet with a pistol in his hand. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow. He pointed toward a narrow door near the shelves, back exit. I reached for it. A hand closed around my ankle. I looked down. One of the men from the entrance lay on the floor behind me. Blood soaked the front of his gray coat, but he was still alive. His fingers tightened around my leg. His other hand reached beneath his body. I saw the black grip of a gun. Fear emptied my mind. There was no time to think. My hand found the heavy brass handle attached to the beer tap. I tore it loose and brought it down against his wrist. Bone cracked beneath the metal. He screamed. The gun slid across the floor. I kicked it away and struck him again. his grip released. Someone stepped over me. Luca. He fired once into the man's chest. The scream stopped. I stared at the body. Luca caught my face between his hands and forced me to look at him. "Are you hit?" I could not answer. "Natalie." It was the first time he had said my name. I had never told him. My eyes moved toward him. "How do you know my name? Your luggage tag." Another shot ripped through the shelves behind us. Luca shoved me down and returned fire. The bartender opened the narrow door. Cold air rushed into the room. "Move," Luca ordered. I crawled through the doorway and found myself in a narrow service corridor lined with boxes and metal shelves. The bartender followed, then locked the door behind us. Luca came last. Blood marked the knuckles of his right hand. A tear crossed the sleeve of his jacket near his shoulder. I stared at it. "You are bleeding. It is not mine." That should not have made me feel better. It did. The corridor ended at a steel door opening into an alley. 2 black vehicles waited outside with their engines running. Men in dark coats moved around them with weapons drawn. The moment Luca appeared, everyone looked toward him. One man opened the rear door of the nearest vehicle. Luca placed a hand at my back. I pulled away. "No." His eyes narrowed. "No, I am not getting into a car with a stranger who just shot 3 people. 4. I stared at him. That was not the important part of that sentence. A bullet struck the brick wall above us. Dust burst into the air. Luca pushed me against the side of the vehicle and covered me with his body. His men fired toward the far end of the alley. He looked down at me. "Get in the car." I got in. The door slammed behind us. The vehicle moved before Luca had fully taken his seat. I pressed myself against the opposite door. My heart was beating so hard that each breath hurt. Luca removed his jacket and examined the tear near his shoulder. A shallow line of blood marked his shirt. "So it was yours." He looked at the wound. "Apparently." I found a white handkerchief inside the pocket of his jacket. "Give me your arm." He raised one eyebrow. "You are bleeding on the seat. That concerns you. It looks expensive." For the second time that night, something almost like amusement touched his face. He held out his arm. I wrapped the handkerchief around the cut and tied it tight. His skin was warm beneath my fingers. He did not flinch. The car turned sharply. I braced one hand against the seat. Who were they men who work for Raphael Bellini? And who is Raphael Bellini? A man who believes Chicago belongs to him. Does it know? The certainty in his voice filled the vehicle. I looked through the tinted window. The streets blurred past in wet lines of gold and white. "Why did they call me your weakness? Because you were sitting beside me. That seems like a weak basis for murder. Bellini has killed people for less." I turned toward him. "What exactly do you do?" He met my eyes. Transportation, warehousing, construction, and the part where strangers shoot at you that is less official. The car slowed beneath a covered entrance behind an old brick building. Armed men opened the doors. Luca stepped out first. I stayed inside. He looked back at me. "You can remain in the car if you prefer." "Where are we?" "One of my offices." "That is not an answer. It is the answer available to you on the sidewalk." I climbed out. Inside, we passed through a restaurant kitchen that had been closed for the night. The cooks had gone home, but pots still hung above the counters, and the air smelled of garlic smoke and wine. A staircase led to the second floor. At the top was a private office with dark wood walls and windows overlooking the street. 2 men waited inside. One was broad and solid, with short black hair and a scar along his chin. He looked at me as if I were a problem he had not approved. The other wore glasses and held several legal folders against his chest. Luca, the man with the glasses, said, "We have less than 3 hours." The broad man looked at the blood on Luca's sleeve. "What happened? Bellini sent company." His eyes moved to me. "And she is Natalie Reed." I looked at Luca. He had not only read my luggage tag, he had remembered the full name. The man with the glasses shifted the folders. "We need to speak privately." I folded my arms. I would also enjoy some privacy. Unfortunately, people keep shooting through it. The broad man's expression hardened. Luca removed the blood-stained handkerchief from his shoulder. "Nico, secure the building. Jonah, tell me what happened." Nico did not move. "What about her?" "She stays." Nico looked at me once more, then left. Jonah opened the first folder. The appellate judge denied the emergency motion. The trust transfers voting control at 6 this morning unless the marriage condition is satisfied. I stared at him. The what condition? Both men looked at me. Luca walked to a cabinet and poured water into a glass. My grandfather created a trust controlling the voting shares of DeSantis Freight Holdings. Jonah continued carefully. The trust requires the principal heir to be legally married before assuming permanent control. I looked from Jonah to Luca. You have to get married before 6, Jonah said. I checked the clock on the wall. It was after 3. I laughed. Neither man joined me. You are serious. Luca handed me the water. Unfortunately. I took it because my hands needed something to hold. Why would your grandfather care whether you were married? He believed unmarried men were reckless. I looked toward the blood on Luca's shirt. He may have had evidence. Jonah lowered his eyes, hiding a reaction. Luca did not. My grandfather believed a wife would give the heir something to lose, and you spent your life refusing. I spent my life refusing to allow a dead man to choose it. Jonah placed another document on the desk. If the condition is not met, voting control passes to a board block for 5 years. A block Bellini owns, Luca said. Jonah nodded. Not officially, but he has compromised enough members to take control by sunrise. I looked at Luca. So Bellini gets your company. He gets access to the route's warehouses contracts and people attached to it. And you waited until tonight to deal with this. I have been fighting the clause for 7 years. You lost. His jaw tightened. Yes. Silence settled across the room. Outside, sleet tapped against the windows. I drank the water. Then Luca looked at Jonah. Leave us. Jonah hesitated. Luca, go. He gathered the folders, but Luca stopped him. Leave the agreement. Jonah placed a thin packet on the desk. Then he walked out and closed the door. I stared at the papers. What agreement? Luca faced me. The men in the bar saw you with me. Bellini will assume you matter. I do not. He does not need the truth. The words were almost the same ones he had said earlier. He needs leverage. My fingers tightened around the glass. I can call the police. You can? You do not sound concerned. Bellini owns people in the department. The officers who do not belong to him will ask why you were at the Iron Saint and why 4 men died around you. I did not kill anyone. You broke a man's wrist. He had a gun. I know. Luca moved closer to the desk. I can place you in a guarded hotel under another name, but Bellini will continue looking. He will also look at your family, your employer, and the man you left tonight. My stomach tightened. You know about Daniel, I know enough. You had someone investigate me while we were driving. That is insane. It is efficient. I set the water down too hard. Do not use my word against me. It was my word. You are impossible. I have been called worse. He slid the packet toward me. What is that, a marriage agreement? I looked at him, then at the papers, then back at him. You cannot be serious. I need a wife before sunrise. You need protection Bellini cannot mistake. That is not a marriage. That is a hostage exchange. It is a contract. With a man I met in a bar, with a man whose enemies already know your face. I walked toward the window. Below us, 2 black vehicles blocked the alley. Men stood at every entrance. My reflection looked pale against the glass. What happens after sunrise? The marriage remains public until Bellini's immediate challenge is contained. Then, Jonah files for annulment. And in the meantime, you live under my protection. That sounds like imprisonment with expensive furniture. It can be whatever the contract says. I turned. You would marry a stranger because your grandfather left a ridiculous condition in a trust. I would marry a stranger to keep thousands of employees from falling under Bellini's control. That sounds almost noble. It is not. I also prefer to keep what belongs to me. There was the honesty again. Cold, direct, free of decoration. I hated that I trusted it more than Daniel's apologies. Why me? Everyone Bellini knows I have considered is being watched. You considered other women. I prepared alternatives. How romantic. Romance is not one of the terms. I looked at the packet. And I'm useful because no one expected me. You are useful because Bellini does not know you, and because you did not freeze when a man reached for a gun. I hit him with a beer tap. You acted. My eyes returned to Luca. He was not praising me. He was measuring me. For years, Daniel had called me strong whenever he wanted me to carry something for him. Luca called me useful because he had watched what I did under pressure. The distinction should not have mattered. It did. I want to speak to the lawyer alone. Luca nodded once. No argument, no attempt to remain in the room. He opened the door and called Jonah back inside. You have 30 minutes, he said. Then he left. Jonah waited until the door closed before sitting across from me. You are allowed to refuse. Would I be safe if I did? He chose his words carefully. No one can promise that. Can Luca know? That answer made me look up. Jonah adjusted his glasses. Luca does not make promises he cannot keep. I opened the agreement. The language was dense but understandable. The marriage would be legal. My income would remain mine. I would receive a substantial settlement after the annulment. Luca would assume responsibility for security and legal protection. Neither party could claim the other's premarital assets. I read every page. Jonah answered every question. When I finished, the clock showed 4:17. Bring him back. Luca entered alone. I placed the agreement on the desk. I have conditions. I expected that. First, you protect me from Bellini. You do not use protection as an excuse to lock me inside a house. His eyes held mine. Agreed, unless there is an immediate threat. I decide what happens after the immediate threat ends. Agreed. Second, I keep my job, my accounts, and my professional name. Agreed. Third, you do not touch me without permission. You do not make decisions about my body, and you do not call me yours as though I am property. Something unreadable moved across his face. Agreed. Fourth, Daniel learns about the marriage from me before the press does. We have limited time. Then your people can work quickly. He considered it. Agreed. Fifth, if you lie about a threat that affects me, I walk. That may not always be possible. Then tell me what you cannot tell me. Do not feed me a comfortable lie. He was silent for a moment. Agreed. Sixth, if my name's safety or public image is discussed in a room, I have a seat in that room. That may place you near information you would rather not know. I am finished letting other people decide what I would rather know. Luca glanced at Jonah. Jonah gave the smallest nod. Luca extended his hand. Anything else? I looked at it. Yes. He waited. Do not call me brave when what you mean is convenient. His hand remained between us. I do not use words carelessly. I placed my hand in his. His grip was warm and firm. Then we have an agreement, I said. At 5:48, I stood in a nearly empty courtroom wearing a black dress, a borrowed coat, and shoes still stained with honey. The judge looked exhausted. Jonah held the license. Luca stood beside me with fresh blood darkening the cuff of his shirt. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Daniel had sent another message. Please come home. We can fix this. Sophie's arrived beneath it. I never meant for you to see us. The judge asked whether I understood the legal consequences of the marriage. Luca leaned closer. You can still walk away. I looked at him. Then I looked at the courthouse doors where 2 armed men stood watch. 6 hours earlier, I had believed my life ended in a living room full of broken glass. Now I understood that an ending could also be a door. I am not walking back into the life I left. The judge repeated the question. Do you, Natalie Reed, take Luca DeSantis as your lawful husband? I closed my fingers around Daniel's ring inside my pocket, the diamond pressed into my palm. I do. A sharp crack struck the courthouse window. One guard reached beneath his jacket. A second crack followed. The corner of the glass fractured into a white web. Luca stepped in front of me. The judge froze. Luca looked at him. Finish it. The judge swallowed. Do you, Luca DeSantis, take Natalie Reed as your lawful wife? Luca did not look away from me. I do. The judge signed the certificate. Jonah closed it inside a leather folder. My phone vibrated again. This message came from an unknown number. Mrs. DeSantis, your husband just made you the most valuable target in Chicago. I showed it to Luca. He read it once. Bellini, I asked. Probably. You said I would be protected. His hand closed around mine as his men opened a private door behind the courtroom. You will be. That sounds less convincing with bullets hitting the courthouse. He led me into the corridor. Convincing and true are not the same thing. By noon, I was standing in a guarded bedroom at Luca's estate in Lake Forest, staring at a dark diamond ring on my finger. My phone showed 37 missed calls from Daniel, 21 from Sophie, and 6 from my mother. A news alert appeared across the screen. Chicago shipping executive Luca DeSantis marries mystery woman. Luca stood in the doorway. You should eat. My family thinks my reaction to their betrayal is the emergency. Families prefer familiar damage. I looked at him. I am going back to the apartment. No. The word was immediate. I lifted my hand. Condition 1. His jaw tightened. I will go with you. Condition 6. This is not a meeting. My safety is being discussed. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached for his coat. At the apartment, Daniel opened the door and stopped when he saw Luca behind me. Recognition drained the color from his face. Sophie appeared in the hallway, wearing my cream cardigan again. I walked to her, removed it from her shoulders, and placed it inside my suitcase. Daniel stared at the ring on my hand. You married him? Yes. To punish me, you still think every decision I make is about you. Sophie looked at Luca with open fear. This is insane. I closed the suitcase. No. Believing either of you would change was insane. Daniel stepped toward me. Luca did not move, but Daniel stopped anyway. I love you, Daniel said. I looked at him. No, you loved the life I made easy. His face broke. For 1 second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I saw the dried honey still covering the floor. Neither of them had cleaned it. Luca saw it too. He looked at Daniel. She asked you to clean up one mess. His voice was quiet. You could not even manage that. I carried my suitcase into the hallway. This time Daniel did not follow. When we returned to the estate, a black envelope waited on Luca's desk. Inside was an invitation embossed in silver. Raphael Bellini requested the pleasure of our company for dinner. Beneath the formal words, someone had written a message by hand. Bring your wife. Chicago deserves to meet the woman who changed its balance of power. Luca folded the card once. You are not going. I took it from his hand and read it again. Is my name being discussed? Yes. I placed the invitation back on the desk. Then I have a seat. Luca studied me across the desk. The black invitation lay between us, its silver lettering catching the light from the lamp. Bellini had chosen thick paper hand-pressed edges and the kind of restrained elegance that made the threat feel more deliberate. You are not prepared for him, Luca said. You keep saying that as if preparation is something only you can provide. He will not threaten you directly. That sounds easier. It is not. Luca picked up the invitation and placed it inside a folder. He will ask questions that sound harmless. He will mention people you love. He will tell the truth in ways designed to make you doubt the person sitting beside you. I met his eyes. Then tell me what he might say. A muscle moved in Luca's jaw. He will say I use people. Do you? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. He will say this marriage protects your life because it protects my control of the company. Does it? Yes. He will say I traded one man who wanted something from me for another. Luca went still. That is what he will say. And what will you say that the difference is in the terms? I looked at the closed folder. Then let me hear him. The dinner was scheduled for 8 the following evening. By 7:03, women I had never met were standing in my bedroom with garment bags, shoes, jewelry, and enough cosmetics to open a department store counter. I sent 2 of them away. The third, a quiet woman named Rosa, stayed because she did not try to tell me what Luca preferred. I chose a black silk dress with long sleeves and a high neckline. It was simple from the front, severe enough to look like armor. The back dipped lower than I would have selected for myself, but when I looked in the mirror, I did not see Daniel's abandoned fiancé. I saw someone I did not recognize yet. Rosa fastened a diamond bracelet around my wrist. Mr. DeSantis sent this. I removed it. No. Her eyes widened. It belonged to his mother. That made me pause. I looked at the bracelet again. Did he say why no? I placed it on the dresser. If he wants me to wear something that mattered to his mother, he can ask me himself. Rosa nodded slowly. There was approval in her expression. Luca waited at the bottom of the staircase. He wore a black suit and no tie. The collar of his shirt was open, revealing the faintest line of an old scar near his throat. His gaze moved over me once. It was not hurried. It was not subtle either. You sent back the bracelet, he said. You sent it through someone else. I thought you might prefer not to discuss jewelry. You thought wrong. He held my gaze. It belonged to my mother. I know. She wore it when she wanted people to remember she was more than my father's wife. The words changed the meaning of the gift. I looked toward the staircase. Rosa stood at the top waiting. "Bring it down," I said. A few minutes later, Luca fastened the bracelet around my wrist himself. His fingers touched my skin only long enough to close the clasp. He remembered the agreement. That restraint made the contact feel more intimate than it should have. The restaurant stood on a quiet West Loop street behind dark windows and a brass door with no visible name. Nico drove. 2 other vehicles followed us. When we arrived, Luca's hand rested near the small of my back without touching. "You can still remain in the car. I married you under gunfire." That was not an answer. It was the only one you are getting on the sidewalk. His mouth moved slightly. Then the door opened. The dining room upstairs contained 1 table, 6 chairs, and a chandelier made of smoked glass. The windows overlooked the city, but heavy curtains had been drawn across them. Raphael Bellini stood near the head of the table. He was older than Luca by at least 15 years. His hair was silver at the temples. His suit was dark blue, perfectly fitted, and his smile was warm enough to belong to a favorite uncle. That was what made him frightening. Men like Luca carried danger openly. Men like Bellini invited it to dinner and poured it wine. "Mrs. DeSantis," he said. His eyes settled on the bracelet. "I knew Sophia's jewelry would suit you." Luca's expression did not change. Bellini had spoken his mother's name before offering his own, a message within a greeting. I extended my hand. "Natalie." He took it lightly. "Raphael." Luca pulled out my chair. I sat beside him. Bellini occupied the opposite side of the table rather than the head, making the arrangement look equal. It was not. A waiter poured wine. No one touched it. Bellini began with ordinary questions. How had I found Lake Forest? Was I still working? Had the press become difficult? He asked each one with polite interest, but every answer gave him information. I responded without filling the silence. Luca had warned me that Bellini would use discomfort as an invitation. I let the pauses belong to him. The first course arrived. Bellini lifted his fork. "I understand your original wedding was scheduled for next weekend." Luca looked at me. I looked at Bellini. "You understand a great deal about my schedule. Chicago is a small city when people are interesting. I was not interesting 3 days ago." "No," he said. "You were invisible." He smiled. I imagine that was difficult. The fork in my hand remained steady. Bellini continued. "A competent woman beside an ordinary man is often treated like furniture, useful, reliable, easy to overlook until she is removed." Luca's gaze sharpened. Bellini had not insulted me. He had described me accurately. "That was the first blade. I was never furniture," I said. "No. But Daniel Mercer treated you as if you were." The sound of Daniel's full name in Bellini's voice sent a cold line down my spine. Bellini took a sip of wine. "He arrived at his office at 8:16 this morning. He left at 6:32. Your sister visited him at lunch." I placed my fork down. Luca's hand tightened once beside his plate. Bellini noticed. "Your mother attended morning mass at St. Anne's," he continued. "She stayed afterward to speak with the priest. I imagine she is concerned about the attention. You are watching them. I am informing you that they can be watched." The distinction hung in the air. I felt fear rise slowly, not as panic but as pressure behind my ribs. Bellini leaned back. "Luca believes placing guards near your family makes them safe." I looked at Luca. He did not deny it. Bellini smiled again. "You did not know." I turned toward my husband. "Is that true?" "We will discuss it later." "That means yes." Bellini watched us like a man listening to music. He had found the second blade. Luca's voice cooled. "You invited us to discuss the trust." "I invited you because marriage has changed the balance between us." Bellini looked at me, or perhaps exposed it. The waiter removed the plates and disappeared. Bellini folded his hands. "Tell me, Natalie, why do you think Luca married you to satisfy the trust? And to protect you?" "Yes. And those 2 needs happen to align perfectly." "Yes." He seemed almost disappointed by my lack of resistance. Most women would want to believe there was something else. I had a man who offered me beautiful explanations while lying in my home. I have lost my appetite for comforting stories. Bellini's gaze became more focused. Luca remained silent beside me. Bellini turned his glass between his fingers. "Yesterday, one man wanted you to manage his life. Today, another wants you to secure his empire." The words struck because they were not entirely false. "Perhaps," Bellini said, "your taste has not changed." I looked at Luca. His face revealed nothing, but the silence between us had weight. Then I turned back to Bellini. The difference is that Luca told me the terms. Bellini's smile thinned. And can he predict you? No. Can you predict him? Not yet. That answer disturbed both men. Bellini leaned forward. You are intelligent. That makes you more dangerous to yourself than a foolish woman would be. Because I ask questions. Because you believe answers create control. No, answers create choices. For the first time, Bellini's warmth disappeared. Only for a second. Then he raised his glass. To choices. Neither Luca nor I joined him. The meal ended without an agreement. Bellini did not need one. He had wanted to see us together. He had wanted to test where Luca looked when I was threatened, and where I looked when Luca withheld information. He left with more than he had brought. So did I. The moment the restaurant door closed behind us, I turned to Luca. You placed guards around Daniel, Sophie, and my mother. Nico opened the car door. Luca gestured for me to enter. I did not move. Answer me, yes. How long since the bar? And you did not tell me. There was nothing you could do with the information. That was not your decision to make. It kept you focused. I stared at him, focused on what staying alive. The street was quiet, but Luca's men stood close enough to hear every word. He lowered his voice. Natalie, this is not a discussion for the sidewalk. You keep choosing rooms where I am allowed to have opinions. His eyes hardened. And you keep choosing public places to challenge decisions involving armed men, because you make those decisions without me. A car passed at the end of the street. Nico looked away. Luca stepped closer. I protected them because Bellini would use them to reach you. You hid it because you thought I might object. I hid it because information can become a burden. Then let me decide what I can carry. His jaw tightened. They are alive. That does not make the lie acceptable. It was not a lie. You let me believe no one had touched my old life. No one has. You did. The words stopped him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Luca opened the car door again. This time I got inside. The drive back to Lake Forest passed in silence. At the estate, I went directly upstairs. I did not remove the bracelet. I was angry with him, not his mother. Near midnight, hunger drove me back downstairs. The kitchen lights were on. Luca sat at the long stone island with his shirt open at the shoulder. A metal tray held antiseptic gauze and a needle. The cut from the bar had opened again. He glanced at me. You should be asleep. You should be better at stitches. I did not ask for help. You also did not ask before placing guards around my mother. His gaze darkened. I took the needle from his hand. Sit still. To my surprise, he did. The room smelled of coffee, antiseptic, and rain from an open window near the sink. I cleaned the cut. He did not flinch. You trust men with guns, I said, but not a woman with antiseptic. Men with guns are predictable, and I am not. No. The answer came too quickly to be an insult. I threaded the needle. Why did your grandfather create the marriage clause? Luca looked toward the dark windows. My father nearly destroyed the company after my mother died. How he drank. He gambled. He started wars over insults because grief made him careless and pride gave the carelessness a uniform. I guided the needle through his skin. He believed no one could question him, Luca continued. My grandfather believed a wife would create restraint. Did it? My mother had been the restraint. His voice became quieter. When she died, there was nothing left between my father and his worst instincts. I tied the first stitch. So your grandfather decided every heir needed a wife. He decided fear of losing someone might accomplish what judgment could not, and you spent 7 years fighting him. I refused to let a dead man choose my future. I looked at him. Then you married a stranger 4 minutes before the deadline. My grandfather would have hated you. Good. He would have respected you. That matters less. Luca turned his head slightly. You do not care whether powerful men respect you. I care whether they listen when I am right. Our eyes met. The kitchen seemed smaller. His arm rested beneath my hands. The heat of him moved through the thin fabric of his shirt. I finished the final stitch and cut the thread. You should not have kept the guards from me, I said, I know. The admission surprised me. I set the needle down. Are you saying that because you believe it or because you want the argument to end, I do not say things to end arguments? No. You usually say nothing and wait for everyone else to surrender. His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to my eyes. I will tell you the next time your family's security changes. The next time anything affecting my safety changes. He considered it. Yes. It was not a perfect apology. But it was the first alteration he had made because I demanded it. The alarm sounded at 2:13 in the morning, not a loud siren. 3 sharp tones moved through the estate. Luca stood immediately. The softness vanished from his face. Nico entered the kitchen with a phone in one hand. Calumet warehouse is burning, dispatches compromised. 2 drivers are missing. Luca buttoned his shirt over the fresh stitches. What shipment pharmaceutical transfer, scheduled to move at 3. Move the north team south. Shut down every route connected to Calumet. Nico nodded. I followed them toward the operations room. Luca looked back. Stay upstairs, my name or safety being discussed. This is not about you. Bellini sent the invitation. Bellini watched my family. Bellini attacked your warehouse 3 hours after meeting me. It is about me. He stopped. Nico waited. Luca looked like he wanted to argue. Then he opened the operations room door. Stay out of the way. The room contained 6 wall screens, a long table, radios, and maps marked with routes across Chicago. Men spoke over one another. A warehouse camera showed flames rising behind rows of loading bays. Another screen displayed truck locations. Red alerts flashed across a dispatch system. Nico pointed to 3 vehicles. These trucks received rerouting instructions 15 minutes before the fire. Where are they now? Luca asked. 1 stopped transmitting. 2 are moving toward the south yard. A man at the table said Bellini is taking the pharmaceutical load. Luca issued orders. Men moved. I stood near the doorway and watched the screens. The false instructions used full company names and complete addresses. The driver's normal messages appeared beside them. Short words, abbreviations, familiar codes. The false instructions sounded like legal documents. Who wrote those messages? I asked. No one answered. Nico looked at me. Not now. I stepped closer to the screens. Your drivers do not write like that. They were system instructions, he said. Then whoever created them does not understand how your dispatch team communicates. Luca turned toward me. I pointed to the timestamps. 3 rerouting messages arrived within 40 seconds. The warehouse fire was reported 12 minutes later. So the story existed before the crisis. Nico frowned. I continued. At my firm, when someone wants the public to look in one direction, they prepare the language before the event happens. Bellini wanted your people to see the fire, the missing trucks, and the pharmaceutical shipment as one attack. Luca came to stand beside me. You think it is a distraction? I think it is too obvious. I looked at the map. What else becomes vulnerable when everyone moves south? Nico answered reluctantly. Records facility near the river. 2 smaller warehouses. Contractor archives. What is in the records facility? Luca's gaze sharpened. Municipal contracts, payment histories, names that could hurt you. Names that could hurt half the city. I pointed to the screen. That is the target. Nico shook his head. We have no movement near the river, because you are watching trucks. I turned to the technician. Can you access public traffic cameras? He looked at Luca. Luca nodded. The screens changed. We scanned intersections near the records facility. Nothing. Then I noticed a social media feed open on a side monitor. Why is that there? We monitor incidents near our properties. I moved closer. Several posts mentioned smoke near the Calumet warehouse. One had been uploaded 4 minutes before the first emergency call. That one, I said. The technician opened it. The account belonged to a local news page. The image showed flames behind a fence. I checked the timestamp. They posted before the fire was officially reported. Nico leaned over my shoulder. Scheduled post or someone wanted the fire visible immediately. I searched the account's recent activity. Another image showed a traffic accident near the river. A delivery van blocked the street 2 blocks from the records facility. The post called it a collision. The van carried no company logo. Zoom in. The image enlarged. A man stood beside the van wearing a reflective vest. The vest looked new. His boots did not. Luca saw it too. Bellini's crew. Nico reached for the radio. Luca stopped him. Send half the south team. Quietly. No normal channels. Nico gave the order in person. Within minutes, the map changed. Luca's men approached the records facility from 2 directions. The first report came through 7 minutes later. Armed entry at the east side. Then another. 2 hostages located. Both drivers alive. The pharmaceutical shipment had never been Bellini's target. It had been bait. The room shifted around me. Men who had ignored me now looked in my direction. Nico ended the call. "You were right. It sounded painful for him." "I know." Luca looked at me, and for a moment the chaos in the room disappeared. There was no gratitude in his expression. There was recognition, the kind I had spent years asking from people who claimed to love me. The crisis did not end with the rescue. Someone had entered the dispatch system using an administrative account. The account belonged to Jonah Price. Nico drew his gun before Jonah finished entering the room. Jonah stopped. His face went pale. Luca stood at the head of the table. "Explain." Jonah looked at the weapon, then at Luca. "Bellini has Caleb. The name meant nothing to me. It meant something to everyone else." Nico lowered the gun by an inch. Jonah continued. "My brother disappeared 3 days ago. Bellini contacted me yesterday. He wanted limited access to dispatch. I gave him 1 account." Luca's voice was quiet. "You gave him my network. I restricted the permissions. 2 men nearly died. I know." Nico grabbed Jonah by the collar. "You should have come to us." Bellini's threat had worked because Jonah believed admitting weakness would be more dangerous than betrayal. Luca looked toward the door. "Take him downstairs." Jonah closed his eyes. Nico pulled him forward. I stepped between them. Luca's expression became cold. "Move! You need him alive. He betrayed me. He was coerced. He still made the choice. So did I when I married you. Choices made with a gun nearby are still choices, but they are not simple ones." The room went silent. Luca walked toward me. "Do not confuse your agreement with authority over this." "I am not." "Then move." "No." His eyes hardened. I forced myself not to step back. "If you kill him, Bellini keeps his brother and learns that anyone with a vulnerable family member can never come to you for help." He opened the door. "And now he can show us which door Bellini expects to use again." Luca looked at Jonah. Jonah swallowed. "Yes." I turned toward the dispatch screens. "Then give Bellini something worth stealing. We created a false shipment involving cash reserves hidden inside refrigerated trucks." Jonah sent the information through the compromised channel. Bellini's response came 18 minutes later. A vehicle connected to the false route moved toward an industrial property in Cicero. Nico prepared a rescue team. I remained in the operations room with Luca. The building's electrical use appeared on one screen. I studied it. "That is too low." Luca glanced at me. "For what? For the number of guards you expect. The property had exterior lights, cameras, and heating. The power draw should have been higher." I checked nearby service requests. An auto shop next door had reported underground electrical damage 2 weeks earlier. The 2 buildings shared an old maintenance tunnel. "Caleb is not in the visible building." Nico's voice came through the radio. "Then where the auto shop east of you, basement level." There was a pause, then movement. 6 minutes later, Nico spoke again. "We have him." Jonah covered his face with both hands. Luca did not forgive him. He did not send him downstairs either. By dawn, the fire was controlled. The drivers were safe. Caleb was in a guarded medical room, and Bellini had lost a trap he believed was invisible. At the next council meeting, I entered behind Luca. An empty chair waited near the far end of the table. I moved toward it. Nico pulled out the chair to Luca's right. "This one has a better view of the screens." No one objected. I sat. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it ended, I found Luca on the terrace overlooking the frozen lake. "You were reckless," he said. "So were you. I did not stand between an armed man and someone accused of betrayal. You were about to make a permanent decision while angry. He endangered you, and you were going to kill information you needed." Luca turned toward me. "You believe everyone can be repaired?" "No." The cold wind lifted my hair. "I believe damaged people reveal who they are by what they do next." His eyes held mine. "And what have I revealed? That you know how to protect everything except the part of yourself that wants to be known?" He stepped closer. "Is that your professional analysis? No? What is it, a warning?" His hand rose, then stopped before touching my face. He waited. I closed the distance. The kiss began carefully, almost like another negotiation. Then his hand moved into my hair, and mine closed around the front of his coat. The cold disappeared. For one moment there was no Bellini, no trust, no contract, no family waiting to use the cracks between us. Only Luca, only the fact that he had waited. He pulled back first, his forehead resting against mine. This was not part of the agreement. Neither were bullets at the courthouse. The terrace door opened. Nico stood inside with a phone in his hand. His expression ended the moment before he spoke. We found the contact Bellini used after the warehouse failed. Luca turned. Who? Nico looked at me. Daniel Mercer. On the screen, Daniel entered a Bellini-owned hotel carrying a folder with my name written across the front. The image was silent. That made it worse. Daniel paused beneath the chandelier in the lobby and looked over his shoulder. He wore the navy coat I had bought him for Christmas 2 years earlier. His hair was wet from the snow. His expression held the same nervous concentration he used whenever he knew he had done something wrong but had not yet decided whether to admit it. A man approached him near the elevators. I recognized him from Bellini's dinner. He had stood behind Raphael's chair without speaking, thin and pale with silver-framed glasses and a scar near his mouth. Daniel gave him the folder. The man opened it, checked the contents, then guided Daniel toward a private elevator. The recording ended. For several seconds, I could hear only the wind moving across the terrace. Luca took the phone from Nico. When 40 minutes ago. Is he still inside? We do not know. The hotel cameras went dark 12 minutes after he entered. Luca looked toward the house. Bring him in. I stepped between them. No. Luca stopped. Natalie. You do not get to drag him into a basement because you saw him carrying a folder. He met with Bellini. We do not know why. We know enough. No. We know what the camera showed. Luca's face hardened. Daniel has access to your old accounts, your routines, your family, and 6 years of private conversations. Bellini did not invite him for coffee. I know that. Then move. I did not. The kiss on the terrace still lived on my mouth, but the man standing before me was no longer the one who had waited for permission to touch me. This was Luca DeSantis, the man who believed danger gave him the right to decide quickly and explain later. I will speak to Daniel, I said. You will not go near him. That is not your choice. It becomes my choice when your life is involved. The words landed harder than he intended. Or perhaps exactly as hard. Nico looked away. I held Luca's gaze. That is what every man says before he turns protection into permission. His expression changed. Not much. Enough. This is not Daniel forgetting to pay a vendor. No, it is you forgetting the agreement. I remember every word. Then remember that I have a seat when my safety is discussed. You have a seat. You do not have a vote over whether Bellini uses you as bait. I am not asking for a vote. What are you asking for the truth? I pointed toward the phone in his hand. All of it. Where Daniel is. What you intend to do. What you know about the folder. What you do not know. Luca said nothing. The silence lasted too long. Something cold settled beneath my ribs. You already have him. Nico looked at Luca. That was answer enough. I stepped back, where Luca's jaw tightened. Natalie, where is he? In a secure room downtown. You brought him in before you showed me the recording. He left the hotel 10 minutes after the cameras failed. My men intercepted him before Bellini's people could move him again. Move him again, he claims Bellini threatened him. I stared at Luca. You spoke to him, no. Then who did Nico? I turned toward Nico. He looked uncomfortable, which seemed almost impossible for him. He said he was trying to help you. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course he did. Daniel always became helpful after crossing a line. Luca reached for my arm, then stopped before touching me. Come inside. I looked at his hand. He lowered it. We entered the estate through the terrace doors. The warmth inside felt artificial. The council room lights were still on. Papers from the warehouse operation covered the table along with coffee cups no one had finished. Luca closed the door. Nico remained outside. What was in the folder, I asked. Copies of joint financial statements from your engagement, travel records, old messages between you and Daniel, information about your mother's home, Sophie's apartment, your office, and the wedding vendors. My stomach tightened. Why would he have that? He told Nico he collected it after you married me. For what purpose he claims he wanted to understand what happened. I turned toward the windows. Snow had begun to gather along the terrace rail. He wanted to understand why I left him by building a file on me. Bellini contacted him 3 days ago. I looked back. How through a business associate connected to Daniel's firm. Bellini told him you were in danger and that I was preventing you from leaving. And Daniel believed him. Daniel believed what made him feel necessary. The accuracy of it hurt. I sat at the counsel table. Did he give Bellini anything else Daniel told him you hated feeling trapped? I looked up. Luca's voice became quieter. He said you would leave me if someone gave you a safe exit. The room seemed to hold its breath. Bellini had found the fracture between us without creating it. Daniel had simply pointed toward it. What else he said? You always choose responsibility over desire, that if your family were threatened, you would surrender before allowing anyone else to pay for your decisions. I stared at the papers on the table. Daniel had known me well enough to describe my wounds. He had never known me well enough to stop causing them. Take me to him, I said. Luca shook his head. No, I am not asking and I am not agreeing. I rose. You married me because I was unpredictable. You gave me a seat because I saw what your men missed. Now the moment the danger becomes personal, you want me silent and upstairs. This is not a test of your competence. No. It is a test of whether your promises survive fear. His eyes darkened. You think I am afraid? Yes. The word filled the room. Luca went still. I stepped closer. You are afraid Bellini will take something from you, so you are tightening your hands around it. You are not something, then stop treating me like something you can lock away. For one moment, anger broke through his control. If I let you walk into that room, and Daniel has already given Bellini enough to target you, what exactly do you expect me to do? Stand beside me? That may not be enough. It has to be. No. His voice struck the walls. I will not gamble your life to prove I respect your independence, and I will not surrender my independence to make your fear easier to manage. We stood inches apart. The air between us felt sharper than any weapon. Then Luca stepped away. He opened the door. Nico. Nico entered. Take her to Daniel. Luca looked at me. I will be in the room. That was always the condition. Daniel sat beneath a white light in a windowless office above one of Luca's warehouses. There were no chains, no blood, no visible weapons. That almost made the room more frightening. He looked exhausted. His tie was gone. A bruise darkened one side of his jaw. When I entered, he stood too quickly. Natalie. Luca came in behind me. Daniel's face changed. Fear replaced relief. I sat across from him. Luca remained near the door. You met with Raphael Bellini, I said. Daniel looked at Luca, then back at me. I did not know who he was at first. That is not an answer. He contacted me through a client. He said he had information about you, and you brought him my records. I thought they might prove you were being manipulated. I looked at the table between us. By giving private information to a stranger, he knew things, Nat. About the marriage, about the trust, about what happened at the courthouse. So you decided the criminal with information was more trustworthy than the woman you betrayed. His face tightened. I was trying to help. You always say that after doing what you wanted. Daniel looked toward Luca. He has people following your family, I know. He controls where you go. I know. He is dangerous. I know. The certainty in my voice unsettled him. Daniel leaned forward. This is not you. I almost smiled. You said that when I left the apartment, because you were hurt. I was awake. He flinched. Natalie, listen to me. Bellini said Luca needed you for the trust. He said once the company was secure, you would become a liability. Luca did not move. Daniel continued. He said men like DeSantis do not divorce. They remove problems. I looked at Luca. His face gave nothing away. Daniel saw the glance and mistook it for doubt. He offered to help you disappear. At what price? He wanted information about your habits. Places you would go if you left, accounts you could access, people you trusted. And you gave it to him. I gave him enough to make him believe me. Did you tell Luca's people no? Did you call the police no? Did you call me? I knew he would be listening. I sat back. Daniel lowered his voice. I thought I could get you out. You thought I needed you to save me. You do. The room became very quiet. I looked at the man I had nearly married. He still did not understand, not after the apartment, not after the ring, not after seeing me beside Luca. Daniel did not want me safe. He wanted to become important to the story again. What did Bellini ask you to do next? Daniel hesitated. Luca shifted near the door. I raised one hand without looking back. Luca stopped. Daniel noticed. Something passed across his face. Resentment, not fear. He wanted me to contact you, Daniel said. He wanted me to say Sophie had been taken. My stomach turned cold. Has she? No, not then. Not then, Daniel rubbed his face. I do not know where she is now. I stood. When did you last speak to her before the meeting? What did she say? She was angry. She said Mom blamed her for everything. She said she wanted to leave Chicago. Where was she? At her apartment. I turned toward Luca. Find her. He was already reaching for his phone. Daniel stood. Natalie, wait. I looked at him. He stepped around the table. I did not mean for this to happen. You met with a man who threatened my life. I was trying to undo what I did. No, you were trying to become the man who rescued me so you would not have to remain the man who betrayed me. His mouth opened. No words came. I walked toward the door. Daniel called after me. I still love you. I stopped without turning. No, you love the version of me who made your life easier. Then I left him in the room. Sophie was found 20 minutes later at our mother's house. She was alive. Bellini had not taken her. He had only made Daniel believe he might. That was enough. Fear had done the rest. Luca doubled the guards around my family. Then he replaced my phone. He changed my driver. He blocked access to my office until the building could be secured. He placed 2 armed men outside my bedroom door. He called each decision temporary. By the second day, the estate felt less like protection and more like proof that Bellini had already won something. I tried to leave for work. The front gate remained closed. Nico stood beside the vehicle. I am sorry. No, you are not. No. At least he was honest. I returned to the house and found Luca in the council room. The doors were locked. Voices moved behind them. I knocked. The conversation stopped. A guard opened the door only far enough to speak. Mr. DeSantis asked not to be disturbed. My name being discussed, the guard looked uncomfortable. I placed my hand on the door. Open it. He did not. I looked through the narrow gap and saw maps on the table. My office building appeared on one screen. Daniel's condominium appeared on another. Luca stood at the far end of the room. Our eyes met. He did not tell the guard to let me in. That hurt more than I expected. I stepped back. The door closed. That evening, Luca came to my room. I was sitting beside the window with my laptop open, trying to access work files through a connection his security team had restricted. He remained near the door. You missed a client meeting. You noticed. The building was not secure. You could have told me that before blocking my account. I did what was necessary. You did what was easy. His expression hardened. Nothing about this is easy. You locked me out of a meeting about my life. There were operational details you did not need. I closed the laptop. Bellini told me you would make me doubt the person sitting beside me. And you believe him? No. I looked at Luca. You are doing the work for him. The words struck. He turned toward the window. For a moment I saw exhaustion beneath the control. Then it disappeared. Until Bellini is contained, you remain here. That was not our agreement. The threat changed. So the agreement only matters when it is convenient for you. I am trying to keep you alive, and I am trying to remain a person while you do it. He looked at me. Something in his face almost softened. Then fear closed over it again. I cannot lose you. It was the first time he had said anything that honest. It might have changed everything if it had not come after he took away every choice I had. You do not get to keep me by removing the parts of me you are afraid to lose. He said nothing. I turned back to the window. When I looked again, he was gone. The papers arrived the next morning. A leather folder waited on the small table near my bed. Inside were annulment documents, a financial trust worth $5 million, the deed to a protected residence outside Boston, a contract offering me a senior position at a communications firm with no visible connection to Luca, security arrangements, a new identity if I wanted one. Everything had been prepared. Everything had been decided. A single note rested on top. You fulfilled your part. I will fulfill mine. You are free. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. The package was generous, careful, complete. It was also the coldest thing anyone had ever given me. Luca had found a way to release me without asking whether I wanted to leave. He had turned freedom into another room he could build around me. I signed nothing. I removed the dark diamond ring from my finger. For several seconds I held it above the table. Then I slipped it into my coat pocket. I packed the same suitcase I had carried from Daniel's apartment. No one stopped me when I walked downstairs. Luca stood in the entrance hall. He had known I was leaving. His face revealed nothing. Where will you go, Chicago? That is not safe. Neither is this. He looked at the suitcase. The Boston house is prepared. I do not want your house. The money is yours. I do not want to be paid for surviving you. Pain moved across his expression. It disappeared before I could be certain I had seen it. Natalie. I waited. He said nothing else. That silence was his final attempt to protect himself. I walked past him. Nico drove me into the city. We did not speak until the skyline appeared through the snow. Then he said, "He believes letting you leave is the only decent thing he has done." I watched the buildings grow larger through the window. That does not make it decent. No. Why are you telling me? Because he will not. I looked at Nico. He kept his eyes on the road. He ordered you to follow me, no. Then why are you here? His hands tightened on the wheel. Because you were right about the warehouse. You were right about Jonah. And because Bellini will expect Luca's people to disappear the moment you leave. I looked back toward the road. You are still following me. Yes, at least you admit it. The empty wedding venue smelled of dust flowers and old carpet. Daniel had asked to meet there. He said Sophie and my mother would come. I nearly refused. Then I realized I wanted to see the room without believing it belonged to my future. Unopened boxes lined the walls. The seating chart still stood near the entrance. My handwriting covered the board. Names arranged carefully, conflicts separated, preferences remembered. I had spent months deciding where everyone else would sit. No one had asked where I wanted to be. Daniel stood near the head table. Sophie sat alone beneath the dark chandelier. My mother waited beside her. When I entered, all three rose. For a second, the scene looked like a rehearsal for an apology. Then Sophie began to cry. Natalie. I closed the door behind me. Daniel looked at my bare hand. You took off the ring. I ignored him. My mother stepped forward. We need to talk as a family. No, you need to listen as one. She stopped. Sophie wiped her face. The affair started in July. The words entered the room softly. My wedding had been scheduled for December. Daniel messaged me after the 4th of July party, she continued. He said he needed someone to talk to. Daniel looked at her. You messaged me first. Sophie turned. You told me Natalie made you feel invisible. You said she treated you like a child. You agreed. Their voices rose. I watched them blame each other for a betrayal they had built together. My mother looked at me. Please say something. What would you like me to say that you understand they made a terrible mistake? A 4-month affair is not a mistake. Sophie's face collapsed. I was jealous of you. The room went still. She looked around the venue. You always had everything. The career, the apartment, Daniel. Mom trusted you. Everyone trusted you because I earned it. I know. No. You resented the result without wanting the responsibility. Tears slid down her face. I wanted to know what it felt like to be chosen. I looked at Daniel, and he wanted to feel admired without having to deserve it. Daniel lowered his eyes. My mother moved closer. Sophie could lose everything. I turned toward her. So did I. She is your sister, and I was her sister when she entered my home. My mother's voice broke. I do not want this family destroyed. This family only works when I absorb the damage. She flinched. You asked me to be strong because teaching Sophie to be accountable was harder. I did my best. I know. The words were quiet. That does not mean your best did not hurt me. My mother looked suddenly older. Sophie reached for my hand. I stepped back. I am sorry, she whispered. I believed her. That was the cruelest part. She was sorry now because the consequences had arrived. Daniel said, Can we ever fix this? I looked around the empty room. At the flowers that would never be arranged. At the head table where we would never sit. At the seating chart built around people who had expected me to remain reasonable. No. The answer felt clean, not angry, not dramatic. Final. I removed Daniel's engagement ring from my coat pocket. I had carried it since the courthouse. I placed it on the abandoned head table. Daniel stared at it. "I do not wish either of you suffering," I said, "but I will not protect you from what you chose." Then I turned toward my mother. "I will speak to you when you are ready to know me without asking me to carry Sophie first." She began to cry. I left before instinct could make me comfort her. Near the service entrance, a clipboard hung from a hook beside stacked liquor crates. A vendor schedule had been attached to it. I recognized the names because I had approved the original list myself. One company was unfamiliar. North Meridian Beverage Services. The company had been added as an emergency replacement after the cancellation, but the date beside the approval was 3 days before I caught Daniel and Sophie. I took the clipboard from the wall. The name pulled at my memory. I had seen it in the records facility. A shell company linked to Bellini. I called Jonah. He answered immediately. "Natalie, search North Meridian Beverage Services." Keys moved beneath his voice. "Where did you find it?" "At the venue." Silence. Then Jonah inhaled. "It appears in Bellini's proposed peace agreement." My heart slowed. Not from calm, from recognition. Which section? Property transfers. It is listed as a neutral logistics contractor. It is not neutral, no. I looked at the approval date again. Bellini had entered my life before the Iron Saint. Maybe not because of me, because of Luca. The venue supplier had access to schedules, deliveries, private rooms, guest information, and service entrances. Bellini had been building routes into places connected to influential families across Chicago. My wedding had been one of them. "Where is Luca?" Jonah hesitated. "Preliminary peace meeting. Location, I cannot disclose that." Jonah. Another silence. The old stockyards. I closed my eyes. Bellini's proposed agreement placed North Meridian in charge of document transfers after the peace meeting. He was not offering peace. He was placing his own company inside the handoff. "What records are Luca bringing financial guarantees? Contractor lists, board authorizations, enough to expose every person connected to him. Yes, get him out. I cannot reach Nico. Then reach Luca. His phone is dark inside the building." I walked toward the exit. Nico stood outside beside the car. He saw the clipboard in my hand. "What happened?" I opened the rear door. "Take me back to the estate." He did not ask why. The command center was active when I arrived. Jonah stood over 3 phones. Luca had returned from the preliminary meeting, but the formal agreement was scheduled for the following night. He entered the council room while I spread Bellini's documents across the table. His gaze moved from the papers to me. "You came back. Bellini is planning to kill you. That is not an answer. It is the answer you are getting until we survive this." I circled North Meridian, then 2 more shell companies. They appear in the transfer clause's security schedule and document custody terms. Bellini controls every exit from the agreement. Luca came closer. I showed him the venue schedule. He placed one of these companies inside my wedding before I met you. He has been building access through private events deliveries and contractors. The stockyards meeting is not neutral ground. It is his. Luca read the dates. His expression changed. Not fear. "Calculation, you should still leave Chicago." I stared at him. "Even now, even with the trap exposed." I pulled the annulment papers from my bag and placed them on the table. Then I tore them in half. The sound was small. It silenced the room. Luca's control finally broke. "I am trying to give you a life. No, you are trying to give yourself a version of my life you can survive losing." He went still. I stepped closer. "I do not want the room upstairs. I do not want the money. I do not want to be protected like something you keep behind glass. What do you want the chair beside you? That chair comes with blood. So does yours. I cannot promise you safety. I never asked for a promise you cannot keep." His eyes held mine. "I am not staying because I have nowhere else to go," I said. "I know exactly where the exits are. I am choosing this room." For the first time since I had met him, Luca looked uncertain. "What do you need from me?" I opened Bellini's proposed agreement. Trust my plan. The request cost him more than money territory or blood. He looked at the torn annulment papers, then at the ringless hand resting beside them. Finally, he nodded. I placed the DeSantis ring back on my finger. Jonah brought up the stockyards layout. Nico closed the council room doors. I circled 3 shell companies and 1 hidden transfer clause. Bellini thinks he invited us into his trap. I placed a clean document beside the old agreement and uncapped Luca's pen. Let him believe that. The room stayed silent as I bent over Bellini's agreement. Luca stood across from me, one hand resting on the back of his chair. Nico watched the map on the wall. Jonah opened 3 laptops and began pulling records from every company named in the document. I crossed out Bellini's proposed transfer schedule. He expects you to arrive defensive, I said. He thinks the trust made you desperate, the warehouse attack made you unstable, and our marriage made you vulnerable. Luca looked at the torn annulment papers beside my hand. He is not entirely wrong. No, that is why the trap works. I drew 3 circles on the stockyards map. Bellini had chosen an abandoned packing facility on the southern edge of the old district. The building had 1 visible entrance, 2 loading tunnels, and a network of maintenance corridors beneath the floor. The peace agreement required Luca to bring financial guarantees, contractor records, and signed deauthorizations proving he could surrender 2 freight routes. Bellini wanted the documents and the people responsible for enforcing them in the same room. He will close the loading doors after we arrive, I said. Then he will separate your senior men from the main table. Nico pointed to the eastern corridor. He will place shooters here. And here, I said, touching the western mezzanine, he will want the attack to look internal. One of Luca's board members will fire first. Luca's eyes moved toward me. You believe someone on my council belongs to him. I believe Bellini would never build a plan that depends only on men outside your organization. Jonah turned 1 laptop around. Financial transfers filled the screen. I found payments connected to North Meridian, he said. They moved through 4 subcontractors before reaching a consulting firm owned by Thomas Keene's brother. Nico swore beneath his breath. Thomas Keene had sat at Luca's council table for 12 years. He had voted against the emergency trust appeal. He had also insisted Bellini's peace proposal deserved consideration. Luca looked at the payments once. No anger crossed his face. That frightened me more than shouting would have. Do we remove him now? Nico asked. No, I said. Both men looked at me. If Keene disappears, Bellini changes the plan. We need him confident. Luca's gaze remained on mine. You want a traitor armed in the room with you. I want Bellini to believe he still controls the first shot. And when Keene takes it, he misses. Luca straightened. That is not a plan. It is if we control where he stands, what he sees, and when he decides to move. I turned to Nico. Can you replace the overhead lighting controls? Yes. Can you darken the main floor without shutting down the loading corridors? Yes. Then Keene fires at a silhouette. Luca stepped closer to the table. No. The word carried the same force it had when he tried to keep me from Bellini's dinner. I did not look away. He expects me beside you. He can expect disappointment. If I stay away, he knows we found the trap. I will not use you as bait. I am not bait. I am the reason he will keep talking. Luca's jaw tightened. Bellini saw me as a weakness, but he also wanted to prove that Luca had mistaken intelligence for loyalty. He would not begin the attack until he had tried to separate us. That need would buy time. You asked what I needed from you, I said. I need you to trust that I understand the risk. Understanding a bullet does not stop it. No. Planning where it travels does. Nico cleared his throat. We can put armor beneath the dress. Luca looked at him. Nico lifted both hands. She is going whether you approve or not. I almost smiled. Luca did not. For the next 6 hours, we changed Bellini's agreement without changing its appearance. Jonah prepared false documents showing that Luca would surrender 2 profitable shipping routes. The routes existed, but their accounts had already been emptied and their contracts reassigned. We created a warehouse location that appeared to hold DeSantis financial records. It held something else, Bellini's own backup ledgers. Jonah had found them through the same compromised channel Bellini once forced him to open. He copied the records, then placed the originals inside a secured archive at the stockyards. Bellini would believe he was stealing Luca's empire. He would run toward evidence that could destroy his own. Nico placed teams inside the maintenance tunnels before dawn. None used DeSantis vehicles. None carried standard radios. Every order moved through a temporary system Bellini had never seen. By sunset, the snow had stopped. Chicago looked clean from the estate windows. The illusion did not reach the streets. Rosa helped me dress in silence. This time I chose dark gray instead of black. The gown fell close to my body and hid the thin armor secured around my ribs. The diamond bracelet remained on my wrist. The DeSantis ring felt heavier than it had at the courthouse. When I reached the entrance hall, Luca was waiting. His suit was black. His face was unreadable. He held a small velvet box. "I already have a ring," I said. "This is not jewelry." Inside was a narrow transmitter. I lifted it from the box. "You could have led with that. It fits beneath the bracelet." He fastened it around my wrist. His fingers remained against my pulse for 1 second longer than necessary. "If anything changes," he said, "you leave through the eastern corridor. If anything changes, I tell you. Natalie, we do this together." His eyes searched mine. Then he nodded. The drive south passed without conversation. Factories and warehouses replaced the glass towers of downtown. Snow darkened beside the roads. The remains of the old stockyards rose ahead of us, brick walls and broken windows beneath a colorless sky. Bellini's men searched the vehicles at the gate. They took visible weapons. They did not find the transmitter beneath my bracelet. The main hall smelled of rust, cold stone, and old smoke. Metal rails crossed the ceiling. Chains hung motionless above a long steel table. Raphael Bellini waited on the opposite side. 3 of his business allies sat beside him. I recognized Carlo Vescari, Martin Russo, and Peter Sanz from Jonah's files. Each controlled routes Bellini needed but did not fully own. Thomas Keene stood near Luca's side of the room. He smiled when we entered. It was the first time I noticed how carefully he avoided looking at Nico. Bellini rose. "Mrs. DeSantis, Natalie." His gaze moved to the ring on my hand. "I heard your marriage had reached an early conclusion. You hear many things from frightened men." Keene looked down. Bellini smiled. Luca pulled out the chair beside his. I sat. Nico remained behind us. Jonah placed the agreement on the table. Bellini did not open it. Instead, he looked at Luca. "You have brought your wife into another dangerous room." Luca sat. "She insisted." "Of course she did." Bellini turned toward me. "Intelligent women often confuse access with authority." I removed my gloves and placed them beside the agreement. Powerful men often confuse silence with agreement. Carlo Vescari shifted in his chair. Bellini noticed. His smile became thinner. "We are here to end unnecessary conflict," he said. "Then we agree on one thing," I answered. He ignored me and addressed Luca. "In exchange for peace, you surrender the Calumet route and the Eastern municipal contracts. Your board recognizes neutral oversight of the records transfer." "Neutral oversight through North Meridian," I said. Bellini finally looked at me. "A respected contractor, owned through 3 holding companies connected to you." Martin Russo leaned forward. Bellini's expression did not change. "You have been reading documents you do not understand. I understand them well enough to know North Meridian was inserted into my canceled wedding before I met Luca." A small silence followed. Bellini folded his hands. "Chicago businesses often share vendors. They also share bank accounts when someone wants the money difficult to trace." Jonah opened a folder and passed copies across the table. Bellini did not look down. His allies did. Carlo read the first page twice. "What is this? Payments from companies under your control," I said. Bellini reported them as losses caused by the conflict. He collected reimbursement from each of you, then moved part of the money into private accounts. Bellini laughed softly. "A communication strategist with a few spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are useful when men assume no one will compare them." Peter Sanz turned toward Bellini. "You said the Riverside losses were DeSantis seizures." "They were." "No," Jonah said. "The goods were sold through North Meridian 2 days before the reported theft." Bellini's warmth disappeared. Luca remained silent beside me. He was letting me speak. Bellini looked toward him. "You brought your wife to accuse me because you lacked the courage to do it yourself." Luca rested one hand on the table. "You should discuss the accusation with my wife." Bellini's eyes hardened. "I negotiate with men who own things, not the things they own." Luca began to rise. I placed my hand over his wrist. He stopped. The movement was small. Everyone saw it. I looked at Bellini. "Then you have misunderstood the ownership structure. Carlo pushed the documents toward Bellini. Did you move our money? Bellini did not answer. Martin opened a second page. This account belongs to my nephew. Your nephew is dead, Bellini said. Yes, Martin's face changed. The payment had been issued 2 days after the murder. Bellini's coalition began to fracture without a shot being fired. That was the part he had never expected. He believed fear held men more tightly than suspicion. He was wrong. Fear obeyed until it found another exit. Bellini looked at me. You believe Luca is different. I believe Luca understands the agreement we made, and when he does not, then he loses me. The answer came easily. I turned my head just enough to meet Luca's eyes. He knows it. Bellini watched us. For the first time, I saw uncertainty beneath his control. Then Thomas Keene moved. I saw him first in the reflection of Jonah's dark laptop screen. His hand disappeared beneath his coat. The overhead lights went out. I dropped beneath the table. A gun fired. The bullet struck the empty chair behind me. Nico fired once in return. Keene fell against the wall. The hall erupted. Bellini's men pulled weapons from beneath the table. Luca overturned it and dragged me behind the steel surface as bullets struck the floor. The loading doors slammed shut, exactly as planned. Then the locks released again. Nico's teams entered through the maintenance corridors. Gunfire echoed beneath the hanging rails. Luca crouched beside me. Are you hit? No. His hands moved over my shoulders and ribs, checking anyway. I said no. I heard you. Across the hall, Bellini disappeared through a side door. I touched the transmitter beneath my bracelet. Nico, Western Archive. His voice answered through the tiny receiver. He is moving. Luca understood. The records. We ran through the side corridor. The old building narrowed into concrete passageways lined with rusted pipes. Emergency lights flashed along the floor. Bellini had 2 men with him. Nico's team intercepted one near the stairwell. Luca struck the other before the man could raise his gun. We reached the archive room as Bellini tore open the false records case. He stared at the ledgers inside. His own company names filled the pages. For the first time that night, his composure broke. You moved them. Jonah appeared behind us with Nico. You should have changed the password, Jonah said. Bellini raised his gun. It pointed at me. Luca stepped forward. I caught his sleeve. Bellini smiled without warmth. She taught you restraint. No, Luca said. She demanded it. Bellini's finger tightened against the trigger. You think this ends with me. He will become another Daniel. He will admire your usefulness until it challenges his authority. I did not dismiss the warning. That was what Bellini expected. Instead, I looked at Luca. If he does, he loses me. Then I faced Bellini again. The difference is that he knows. Bellini shifted the gun toward my chest. Luca fired. The sound struck the small room like thunder. Bellini fell against the records case. The weapon slipped from his hand. No one moved for several seconds. Then Nico crossed the room and kicked the gun away. Bellini looked up at me from the floor. The polished warmth was gone. The feared man beneath it looked smaller than I had imagined. Blood spread across his shirt. You were supposed to be leverage, he whispered. I looked at the ledgers beside him. So were you. His eyes closed. The remaining fight ended minutes later. Without Bellini, his men surrendered or fled. Carlo, Martin, and Peter agreed to meet again before dawn, not out of loyalty to Luca, out of fear that Bellini's records would expose them too. We returned to the main hall. Broken glass covered the floor. One overhead chain swung slowly above the table. I sat in the same chair. Luca stood beside me while Jonah placed a clean agreement in front of us. This version contained my terms. No family members would be used as targets. Neutral commercial zones would remain protected. Financial disputes would require independent verification. Any group violating civilian territory would lose access to shared routes. Bellini's shell companies would be dismantled. Legitimate operations would be separated from the businesses that had funded his private war. Carlo read the document. You expect us to accept rules written tonight? I picked up Luca's pen. No. I expect you to accept rules written after we learned what your previous agreement was worth. I crossed out one sentence and replaced it with stronger language. No one interrupted. By sunrise, the war was over. Not forever. Nothing in Luca's world was permanent. But Bellini's coalition had broken. His accounts were frozen, and his roots had been divided under terms none of his former allies could control alone. Jonah remained under review. Luca did not forgive him quickly. Neither did I. Caleb recovered in a private hospital guarded by men who now understood that admitting fear was safer than hiding it. Nico stopped calling me Mrs. DeSantis during meetings. He called me Natalie. 2 weeks later, the board appointed me Chief Strategy Officer of DeSantis Freight Holdings. The position belonged to the legitimate company. The authority reached farther. My mother sent a letter. She wrote that she had asked me to be strong because it was easier than asking Sophie to grow. I read the letter twice. I did not answer immediately. When I finally agreed to meet her, I chose the restaurant, the time, and the conditions. Sophie left Chicago. Her relationship with Daniel ended before the month did. Daniel lost several clients after his meeting with Bellini became known. I did not expose him. I also did not protect him. His final message arrived on a quiet Sunday morning. "Did you ever love me?" I stared at the screen for several minutes. Then I wrote back, "I loved the life I thought we were building. I do not live there anymore." I blocked his number. Luca took me to the courthouse 3 weeks after the stockyards meeting. No bullets struck the windows. No guards ran through the halls. No judge waited inside. We stood on the courthouse steps beneath a pale winter sun. Luca handed me a leather folder. Inside were amendments to our marriage contract, equal access to every financial decision affecting me, independent control of my assets, formal authority within DeSantis Freight Holdings, the right to reject security restrictions when no immediate threat existed, a legal exit without financial penalty, the Lake Forest estate placed in both our names. I looked up. "The first contract protected your empire, yes, and this one," his eyes held mine, "protects your choice." I signed on the courthouse steps. Not because I had nowhere else to go, because every exit remained open. That night we stood on the terrace overlooking the frozen lake. Luca gave me a simple wedding band. I kept the dark diamond ring beside it. One represented the bargain. The other represented the choice that followed. "Do you regret entering the Iron Saint?" he asked. I thought about the broken wedding favors, the shattered courthouse window, Bellini's gun, and the chair waiting beside Luca's. "I regret the shoes." He glanced at my boots. They were impractical. They were expensive. That did not make them practical. I smiled. His hand touched my face. He waited until I leaned into him. Then he kissed me. Months later, I entered the council room carrying a revised shipping agreement. The men around the table stood, not because Luca's wife had entered, because I had. I took the chair at Luca's right hand. He slid a pen across the table. I read the proposed terms, crossed out an entire paragraph, and began writing. No one spoke until I finished.